People, what's happening? It is the week 3 edition of Fantasy Football Sunday presented by fantasysportsmarkets.com. My guy, Justin Fensterman, back after a week 2 hiatus. It is good to see you. You're looking sharp. You are looking refreshed. You're wearing a Detroit Pistons jersey because you believe in the Lions. So I don't know if... Listen. I made a claim earlier in the week that I am buying in on Mitch Trubisky for week 3 for Monday Night Football, and a lot of people thought I was drunk. So you're showing up you're buying into the Lions, and I'm gonna get by on this with you. Like, we're gonna work through this together. But it's good to have you back, buddy.
Thank you, sir, and thank you. And a lot we're going to be talking about today. A lot of focus, Ben, is going to be on that Dolphins-Cowboys game because we want that Cowboys offense, and I get it as well with the Jets-Patriots as well. We'll go over all the injuries. But, Ben, I can't get over this Lions-Eagles game because while the Eagles don't give up a ton of yards rushing, passing, they're one of the worst in the leagues, and that's why, for me, who's even lost season, I'm streaming Matthew Stafford in a few places in DFS and season long.
Yeah, based on the numbers this year, every indication is that you can throw on the Eagles. And I do think at some point they're going to get it right. I'm still a believer in Pittsburgh trying to get things right, especially with Ben Roethlisberger coming into that game in week 2 already not healthy. So I'm buying into a lot of these turnarounds. These are all things that we're going to talk through. And remember, you guys can send in your lineup questions in a variety of ways. You can do it on Twitter, at Benny Heist, at Fensty Sports, at FSM Contest. If you're watching on Periscope, we're able to get your questions live. For those of you that are on Facebook, watching on our personal pages, those are available as well. And, of course, the great people on YouTube Live. So we will get to all of your questions. Many of you already submitted them before the show, so we will get to some of them in the next few minutes. But one game that we have to start in, this is the game that everyone had the most excitement about from a fantasy perspective to begin things this year, Fensty. Really for this week, was the Ravens at the Chiefs. It's the Chiefs home opener. The weather in Kansas City is terrible right now. Not much of a factor when it comes to wind, but it is raining awfully heavily. Tell me about your perspective heading into this game, where your thoughts were now at the beginning of the week versus now, and whether things have changed for you because of the weather.
I mean, it's changed a little bit, Ben, because, again, we've seen that crazy weather that happens in Kansas City. It really impacted us a few times last year as well, Ben. And you being in Kansas City normally was actually perfect for it. Literally the perfect storm, pun intended. But now you on the road, we don't have that bird's eye view of what is exactly going on in KC. But I'll tell you this, Ben. I still have Mecole Hardman in a lot of places in DFS.
I love to hear you say that. That's my guy.
That's really the main play. But the other main play I have maybe had Mark Andrews, Ben, because while we've gotten multiple reports, conflicting reports, Schefter said very in the wee hours of the night that he's 50-50 for the game. New reports have come out that he's expected to play. But then there might be a little bit of a caveat, Ben, and that if the weather is really that bad, they might sit Andrews. Remember, the Ravens have multiple tight ends, and they could go with someone who's a bit more healthier when it comes to this weather conditions. They want Andrews for the long term. He's had a great season. But, Ben, with Hayden Hurst and also Nick Boyle, there are other options, and that scares me.
Yeah, and that's perfectly reasonable considering the start that Andrews has had. They've found ways to just dial him open each and every week, and this is somebody that was maybe going as tight end 11, tight end 12. The only reason he was going up that high, Fensty, was because the preseason reports on Andrews were so good and so impressive that a lot of people are saying, all right, we might start to buy into the hype, but nobody expected Lamar Jackson to be throwing the ball as well as he has so far this year. So you're right. I think this is a week that if you're going to play a lot of these guys, maybe you play them naked if like you're playing them on fantasysportsmarkets.com and you're doing the super flex, Pat Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, because both of them are still going to get their points today. Like, let's make no mistake about it. There's been some line movement. The total's gone down a couple of points. But I still think Mahomes can throw it through, whatever weather comes his way. And if anything, this is going to force Lamar Jackson to have to run the ball a little bit more as well. And when you're already fast in rain, it's already tough enough to tackle in the NFL. I think this almost allows him to have his floor go up a little bit in this one.
Right. It's interesting, and I don't expect ownership to be as high as we've seen. I mean, we're still in the is Lamar Jackson for real. I mean, look at the matchups. Been a little soft thus far, Ben, and this is another one where you're already seeing the high total. If it goes down from 52 to 51.5 like it has, then yes, I'm still not as concerned. But something that you mentioned, Ben, the run game, and especially you mentioned Lamar Jackson. What about the Chiefs' health when it comes to their running backs? Because we got no Damian Williams.
Right.
LaShawn McCoy should play. That's the key. Should play, but is this the time where we put everything, all the chips into Darwin Thompson, considering the weather?
I don't know if I'm ready to put all of my chips in. I love the Kansas
Neither am
City
I.
Chiefs running backs, Fensty. I've talked about them ad nauseum, both on this show, on the podcast that I do, on the videos with my guy Derek Brown at the Quan Edge. Like, I buy into what Andy Reid does with his running backs. They're the most efficient in NFL history. They're involved in the passing game. He uses them in the red zone. So from that perspective, I'm usually all in. But against Baltimore, it's always going to be an issue, especially with their stout front seven, their ability to create pressure. And listen, I believe in Damian Williams. I was a big fan of him at the beginning of the season. But with McCoy, like, if his usage is fine, maybe use the dart throw in GPPs this week, but I'm not ready to go full in on board. Same thing goes with Darwin Thompson. Like, I like him most weeks. I don't know if I'm ready to commit to him this week.
I'm with you, Ben, and that's why, again, with the ownership of this game, whereas normally with a high total, we normally have a few games, Ben, that are in the 50s when it comes to Vegas lines. This is the sole game that's in the 50s right now, which makes me feel like my ownership is going to be spread out a little bit more this week than it would be. And now with these weather concerns, I'm going to be, I don't want to say off this game completely, but I'm looking at a lot of other games, especially when it comes to game stacks tonight.
Yeah, and we'll go through all these different games. Remember, at the end of the show, Fency and I will go over our favorite cash plays over on fantasysportsmarkets.com this week. I assume you'll be back in the contest as well, rolling, trying to get some cash this week, trying to go for that 220K.
I've been a few on FSM, and even though I wasn't around for last week's show, Ben, my lineups after the 1 o'clock games were dominating, and you guys weren't able to challenge me. But then I had Alshon Jeffrey. He got hurt, and that's where some of FSM's toughest competitors got me there in the afternoon and the evening. But when it came to the 1 o'clock contest, Ben, I was owning it last week.
There you go, and that was something that I would have loved to have gotten some of Fensty's expertise on, because rough week for your boy. I think there was about 7 or 8 people that beat me in the Beat Benny Heist contest this week. Already seeing some questions coming in from our guy PD Dubs, who checks in each and every week. We'll get to him in just a second. Same with Sam C on YouTube. But let's get to some of your Twitter questions as well. This one coming in from Adam at AdamJ_O. It's quarterback toss-up this week, Fensty, between Kyler Murray and Aaron Rodgers. Tough one to be able to go over. So who do you like?
Man, I still, at this point, am going to go with Aaron Rodgers. I still believe in him. That's at the end of the day, Ben. I'm still going with Aaron Rodgers. Think he's the better quarterback. Kyler Murray is going to see some woes. I know, and I love what I've seen from Murray and Larry Fitzgerald. He's going to be in my wide receiver 2 or 3 rather than the flex play, Ben, that I thought he would be. This game, though, today, even though it's a good matchup for the Cardinals here against the Carolina Panthers, I'm still going Aaron Rodgers with this one.
Yeah, Rodgers, even though he's at home against Denver, it just feels like the Broncos, whenever they leave Mile High, they fall apart. And they played the Bears really tough. And it feels like the Bears had this weird game plan to go in and just be as conservative as possible, which doesn't line up with what Matt Nagy typically does. But there's also been some capital between him and Mitch Trubisky that's been burned so far this year. So I think Rodgers knows how to handle Denver. I remember it might have been a couple years ago. First 2 games started off at Mile High. They looked great under the Vance Joseph regime. Went on the road to Philadelphia, gave up about 50 points. I think Green Bay should have their way with him. We'll see whether or not they move Chris Harris to shadow Devontae Adams. Normally, he's just an outstanding slot cornerback. But they moved him around last week to shadow Allen Robinson. So I think Rodgers is probably the safe option. However, the Carolina-Arizona game is really intriguing to me because I think Carolina, and I might be on an island here, Fensty, but the Panthers' defense hasn't looked terrible. Like, they were fairly effective against the Rams. They slowed them down in week 1. Week 2, Jameis Winston didn't do anything spectacular. Chris Godwin had a really nice game. Peyton Barber had a touchdown. But they were on the field for so long because Cam just could not convert after starting the game 7 of 8 and re-aggravating his foot. Like, I'm not giving up on Carolina. I was too big on them to start the year. I think Kyle Allen can actually stabilize things for the Panthers, and I think their defense might come through and slow down Kyler Murray today.
I mean, do you think, Ben, in tournaments, because I've heard this a few times on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, which I'm watching what everybody's saying there, few are in on Kyle Allen this week, Ben. I mean, again, looking to be different in these tournaments, you want to win the big pot, then this is the kind of quarterback you're going to have to start this week, Ben. What's the confidence level for you starting him in DFS?
Not on fantasy sports markets. I just think there's
No.
too many better options available. I certainly think if you were looking around on some of the other sites, maybe he's a considerable option. I do think it allows, knowing that they have a quarterback that's going to complete more than 55% of his passes. And again, this isn't me knocking Cam, because when Cam is healthy, Cam is a top 5 fantasy quarterback. You're in agreement on that, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Man, I want to say right outside. I've never owned Cam Newton. Part of the problem is health. Part of the problem is, despite the fact that he's very athletic, maybe I don't want to say the most, but one of the most athletic quarterbacks in this league, and that he runs, Ben, that really, at the same time, as much as he vultured touchdowns, that turned me off to him because of stuff like this. Because now, every year, I feel like we're dealing with injuries with this guy.
right.
Fully healthy, though, Ben, with the athleticism, right around that top 5.
That's perfectly reasonable. I just say that because he was the quarterback 4 in fantasy last year up until he got hurt, and that's when things started to really go south for Carolina. I think they started the year 7-3, 6-3 maybe, and it just all fell apart after that. So I'm still buying into the fact that Carolina's got a ton of skill players that I really like on the offensive side. I think you'll see much more Christian McCaffrey today. I think Curtis Samuel, who connected with Kyle Allen in Week 17, should be in line for a nice game. And DJ Moore's been a top 5 targeted wide receiver all throughout this season. So I'm buying into Carolina. I think they have a nice game because I don't buy into Arizona's defense. Right. So if Carolina can build themselves a little bit of a lead, maybe Kyler Murray turns the ball over a little bit. Maybe he takes some chances. He's still a terrific fantasy quarterback, but I still think Carolina's defense is a defense that you can buy into. And especially knowing that there's no Cam Newton, I think they're going to step their game up this week. But I know that I'm in the minority there.
No, but you saw how Baltimore ripped up Arizona. So then you might be onto something. And again, we're trying to be different here. We're not trying to be hot take artists. We're looking at these matchups. And I'll say this as well. Greg Olsen, who we didn't think was going to play last week with the back injury, you're thinking, oh, this guy is old as heck. He's back injury. Nah, bro, he's not playing. What happened? He played and he produced. We'll say this today. You mentioned some of the options. Greg Olsen will play, according to reports, in today's game versus Arizona. And also, we talked a little bit about Broncos-Packers. Cortland Sutton, who's been a little bit banged up, he's also in for today's game.
We got Twitter questions from Chris. We got Twitter questions from @thehookshot, from Corey. We'll get to you guys coming up in just a second. Our buddy Mark, the overseer, is checking in as well. Always love to hear from Mark. But let's get to some of your questions.
I love hearing from the guy who's the hook shot, the sky hook. I'll have to put on the Kareem jersey one day.
Yes, you absolutely will. I used to have a Kareem jersey, and I don't know what happened to it. I think somebody stole it. And by somebody, I mean my younger brother, Andrew. By the way, speaking of Greg Olsen, I should mention this because we're very excited at Fantasy Sports Markets. We have a new sponsor of a free contest over at FantasySportsMarkets.com. Give it up for DadBodTees.net. They have awesome t-shirts. I am wearing my Bo Jackson Tecmo Bowl shirt right now. You see this fancy? Look at this.
That's so cool.
Is that awesome?
I was trying to wonder the image. I'm like, not Mario.
No. This guy would run over Mario. It's Bo, baby. Bo knows.
He would. Mario enemies would come at Bo Jackson, and he'd just go, boop, kick him away.
So the good news is that over at FantasySportsMarkets.com, there are still a few slots left. Single entry contest for Thursday through Monday. And the good news is that nobody lit it up on Thursday, so your chances of entering a solid Sunday, Monday squad over at Fantasy Sports Markets just went up. Plus, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see a promo code FFSunday. That'll give you $5 for free. You can enter it in any of our daily fantasy contests at FantasySportsMarkets.com. Over $220,000 in prizes. So big shout out to the guys over at DadBodTees.net. I'm very excited about my Bo Jackson shirt. Looking forward to adding to my collection throughout the year. Top 3 winners in that contest, by the way, receive a t-shirt of their choice from the good people over at DadBodTees. From PD Dubs, he always checks in. Also, I see questions from Sam and from Chorus, who will get to all of you guys. It's what we do. We answer your questions live on Fantasy Football Sunday, presented by Fantasy Sports Markets. So from PD Dubs, he says, good morning, guys. Full point PPR. Who do I go with between DK Metcalf and Marvin Jones? He said he also has Allen Robinson in his lineup as well. Absolutely, you should fire up Allen Robinson in a great matchup against Washington. They've been okay against the pass, only allowing about 278 yards, but I think Mitch Trubisky has a big day just because they're so bad against the run, and I think that's going to open things up because he targets Allen Robinson as much as anybody.
You know, let me tell you, Ben, so many people in our fantasy football universe are turned off to the Bears, and especially Allen Robinson. And this is the time as well for those in season-long leagues where you take advantage of the vulnerability of some of your league mates here who are done with some of these options. Allen Robinson is still the Bears' number one wide receiver. He's still going to help you out and return that fifth, sixth round value that you drafted him in. And when it comes to daily, this again, the Bears, an opportunity. Everyone's going to be off of them for at least the next couple of weeks. Ben Heisler on them, and this is why you have to look at them and not just literally flip the page with them. Because Allen Robinson is going to be fine, Ben. Allen Robinson, David Montgomery, I think everything's going to be fine. Mitch Trubisky had very lofty expectations for how he was going to further grow. And so, Ben, that's why I can't look away from Chicago yet. Even though I love the Detroit Lions today. I know it's the Pistons jersey. Marvin Jones is one of those players who's going to be in a lot of my DFS lineups.
Yeah, very, very interesting perspective there. I think of all the, if we're trying to figure out though between DK Metcalf and Marvin Jones, I think Jones is the way to go, especially because you can beat Philadelphia deep down the field. That's where they've been exploited so far this year. From Sam
Ben,
C.
45 on the Vegas total there. Looking at the over for this. Your thoughts on that? Am I too crazy to think that this game can't go over 40? That I think it will actually go over 45?
No, I think you can. I think people are looking at the Lions the first 2 weeks of the season, especially last week at home against the Chargers, and really shutting them down. I think they think that Philadelphia could put up a little bit of points, but also whether or not we'll see it on the Detroit side as well. 45 actually feels right, but I understand your thoughts on going over there.
Right. I'll also say this. Alshon Jeffrey likely out, but hasn't been confirmed out yet. So we, again, just like with Mark Andrews, we're seeing multiple reports. So for those that own Jeffrey, including myself that has a few shares, you're going to have to really watch a true game time decision. Dallas Goedert as well was thought that he was going to be out, now upgraded game time decision. Still been someone I'm looking at, maybe even on FSM to make a difference. Now everyone's going to know about it. Nelson Aguilar.
Yeah.
What do you think about him? I mean, I'm thinking he's going to be a target monster with the injuries.
When those guys have been hurt before, Aguilar has averaged upwards of 8 to 10 targets a game. So he's a good cash game play, I think. If you're looking on the other side, though, maybe JJ Arcega-Whiteside could be in play.
That's
JJ Arcega-Whiteside.
Everyone's on him, Ben, and that's why with me, I really want to stand true and stick to Aguilar here because everyone's trying to make thing out of Arcega-Whiteside, and that could be, but that also makes me a little bit of fearful when it comes to starting Aguilar everywhere.
That's perfectly fine, perfectly reasonable. I think, again, when you have that mindset and that perspective, if you're looking to go with something a little bit different, that's fine. But Aguilar, I think, is a nice target for this week. Let's go back to some of our Twitter questions. There is a quarterback toss-up. And again, plenty of them coming in on the YouTube live stream. For whatever reason, I think there's a little bit of technical difficulties on Periscope. So for those of you that are having trouble finding us on Periscope, we're always available both on Periscope and on YouTube Live and on Facebook as well, so make sure you guys find us wherever. We're always here. We're answering your Twitter questions as well, so make sure you're following us to try and figure out what to do in this particular situation. Okay, so this one comes in from Corey on Twitter. It's another quarterback toss-up, Fensty, between Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson today. So when you look at those matchups, so Watson... let's see. Houston is on the road against the Chargers. And what was the other part of his question? It was Russell Wilson, who was at home against New Orleans. So where do you go here?
Right. I'd actually get and the Metcalf question just came as well. I think, and I'm looking at the Vegas totals here, one of the highest totals on the day is this Texans-Chargers game. I mean, at some point, Watson's going to explode, and I want to be on that train. I think Russell Wilson has the better matchup, though, Ben, in this case. I'm going to go with Russell Wilson here against the Saints. I don't feel that the Saints defense is that much of a threat, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, the thing is that they looked pretty good for a while against the Rams, and then, unfortunately, once Breeze got into the mix of things, once he got hurt, that's when things kind of fell apart for them. So I think they could slow down Russell Wilson, especially Rashad Penny is out today. So that's also something that we got to talk about, whether or not a lot of people thought Chris Carson, he might be in a dangerous situation there, right? Like a lot of people were worried that if he fumbled again, people were worried that Penny might start to get even more carries and take over. That's something that you're not concerned about, though, it sounds like.
No, I mean, look at it without Penny. This is a show me week for Chris Carson. So once again, I'm definitely going with Chris Carson. He will be in a few of my FSM contests. He will be in that flex spot, even in super
He's a
flex.
guy that I think you can get very low ownership on for a guy that has a chance to have a really nice game. And I know that
Right.
because again, like you can run on New Orleans, and you don't have to worry about Lattimore there. Todd Gurley, everybody was worried about Todd Gurley after week one. He looked fine again in week two. I think Chris Carson, especially at home, could be a really sneaky tournament play that I really like this week.
Yep, and just to also, Ben, look at this matchup a little bit when it comes to health. We have a lot of health issues. You mentioned Penny not expected to play with the hamstring injury. Teddy Bridgewater will be getting the start for New Orleans and should be when it comes to the division between him and Ted. Also, will say this for the receivers: Traquan Smith out, Ted Ginn in. And finally, Ben, I have to say this. I just received this question on Twitter about benching Michael Thomas today because of the quarterback situation.
No,
And
no,
that
no,
is
no,
one
no,
that stopped
no, no,
my
no,
tracks,
no,
Ben,
no,
because
no, no.
yeah, I mean, I can't take someone that talented out of my lineup. I don't care who's throwing the ball. It's an NFL quarterback. He's going to find ways to get open. He's one of the best in the game and has been. And the question was Michael Thomas or T.Y. Hilton. That made it a little bit trickier. But Ben, I still have to say Michael Thomas. I'm keeping him in there.
You said between Michael Thomas and T.Y. Hilton?
Yeah. And who's by the way, I'll
Yeah,
say
I
this.
think I
Let me
think you still have to go Thomas, but I do like T.Y. Hilton this week, and
so,
that's going to be a nice contrarian game stack too. Matt
let,
Ryan
let's
going
talk.
up at Indianapolis is a game that I really like today.
I'll say this though, we got a few injury notes that we have to keep track of when it comes to Indy, Ben, and that's both T.Y. Hilton, Marlon Mack. They both should play, but they're waiting until warmups to test out their respective injuries. So it could be a situation if they're not feeling right where the Indy could be down both of these guys. So this is one you're going to be having to watch right down to the wire because we're not going to know these answers till warmups.
Absolutely. Let's continue on. Get your questions coming in on YouTube Live. From Sam C, a running back, or excuse me, got a flex toss up, half point PPR between Josh Jacobs, who's on the road at Minnesota today, or Calvin Ridley on the road against the Colts. Well, you know that volume is not going to be an issue with Josh Jacobs, and that's always encouraging. I talked about
Yep.
why I'm a fan of Matt Ryan today, and my buddy Derek Brown did a great job in his 10 Stats You Need to Win article over at the Quan Edge in discussing Matt Ryan's success going up against zone coverage. I think it's going to be a big day for him, big day for Julio. And Calvin Ridley has 2 touchdowns on the season, and he's finding really good matchup as well. So he's probably the higher upside play for me. I just don't love the idea of Josh Jacobs trying to run on Minnesota's defense right now, so I'm probably going Calvin Ridley.
No, and I'll also say this, and looking at the lines as well, I mean that does place an impact. The total's gone down just a little bit. I saw a half a point last time I checked a few minutes ago for Raiders Vikings as well with the 43. With the 47 though, Ben, it's like we said before we went on today. The 3 matchups I like are 2 of these matchups involved here: Raiders, Vikings, Lions, Eagles, Falcons, Colts. You seem to be on the Matt Ryan train again. I have Calvin Ridley everywhere for those same reasons. I feel safer despite the fact that, like you said, volume isn't an issue with Josh Jacobs, so he might have a safer floor. I'm chasing the points here, going Calvin Ridley.
You know what's interesting is I have one league where I invested really heavily in Bucks players and in Falcons players. So I have Matt Ryan and Jameis Winston as the quarterbacks in that league with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And then I also have Matt Ryan and Calvin Ridley. What I've decided to do today, and you can tell me if you think I'm nuts, is that I'm sitting, well, because I have Amari Cooper as well. So the plays that I have are Evans and Godwin with Amari Cooper as sort of my 2 wide receivers in flex, and I'm benching Ridley, but starting Matt Ryan as opposed to starting Jameis Winston. What do
You're
you think?
hedging.
I'm
You're hedging.
oh, I'm 100% hedging. If I had any confidence in Winston, it would be a full-on Buck stack. And he'll throw for a couple touchdowns today too, but I also think he's always going to turn the ball over. And so I need to make sure, and listen, Matt Ryan's done that too. Matt Ryan has 5 interceptions in the first 2 games of the season. That's going to change. He had 7 all of last year. With Jameis Winston, you never know from a week in, week out perspective.
Right. And I see what you're saying. I mean, normal strategy for me would be, well, if you have more confidence in Matt Ryan, why start both Bucks receivers then? But Then you look on the salaried sites for DFS, and you see for DraftKings even Chris Godwin more expensive than Mike Evans, Ben, which I didn't think would happen. I mean, I know everyone's on Chris Godwin, the breakout year. I get it. But at the same time, I did not expect this early. So, Ben, in your particular situation, I'm fine with that. I feel like if that wasn't the case and we weren't seeing the targets distributed as evenly as that, where you can't tell who's going to be prioritized anymore, I would easily say take one of the two out.
Yeah, but again, like season long makes you do some weird, absurd stuff. That's why it's just always easier to play daily.
To do it, Ben. This is the time to do it because right now, where you're at in your fantasy football season long leagues, you are at the point where there's more room for error. And that, Ben, I think what you're doing is great. You're hedging. You're getting involved in both offenses. Like
you got to get exposure, absolutely.
And if you lose because guess what? It's early in the season. Don't think that 1 week is going to destroy your season.
No doubt. Questions coming in on YouTube Live from PVJ McLean, from Seth Atkins, our guy is checking in. Dropping Science is back with us again, and from Jamil. So we will get to all you guys. But first, a question in from Corey. It says, good morning. For a season-long 12-team half-point PPR, I need one running back and one flex. Oh, Corey, you did the cardinal sin, and you gave us 20 names to try and discuss here. So we're going to have to do the... Come on, Corey. Yeah, either or, guys. Those are always going to be the questions that we have to lean to first. So we'll go through this one by one. We'll do the process of elimination here. So one running back. Let's choose our favorite running backs. So you're big on carry on today, right?
I am. I've done, but between when we put the promotional video and now, I've done a little bit more research. So I'm a little bit more in on stacking when it comes to Stafford and Galladay over Kerryon. But there will be a few lineups, I'm telling you, I guarantee you, because I don't hide anything. I will have Kerryon involved in there and expecting a little bit of lower ownership.
Okay, so let's go between the following. Who do you prefer between Kerryon Johnson and Sony Michel?
Ooh. See, no one, as much as I like Kerryon Johnson, I'm going to go Sony Michel here. I know everybody is not as happy with Sony Michel and the way he's been running, but it's against the Jets. They look pathetic. And this is the perfect game for him to really break out and be a top 5 running back, which I think he's going to be.
And no James White today, out for personal reasons. So more run for Michel.
And I know, Ben, we're not going to discuss any of the off-field stuff. I will say this. It is because of the birth of his child. So I will say that is the personal reason. So for those that are wondering, is this a guy that's not going to be in for the rest of the season? Is he at odds? It's not Antonio Brown.
No. So yeah, there's the Patriots did lose another skill guy this week in Antonio Brown, and Antonio Brown doing himself no favors with how he continues to act, especially with more social media tirades. Things are just getting worse and worse.
It's bad.
It's a bad situation for that dude.
He's trying to make week 3 about himself, and guess what? We're not going to let that happen like Bill Laimbeer. We're going to play some great interior defense and make sure we cover the players actually on the field.
That's true. But Laimbeer was a dirty MFer, though.
Oh, because of the Jordan rules, man. That's why.
Oh, okay.
Because he was able to knock your guy, Michael Jordan, out of the air like nobody else was in the league.
I won't dispute that. All right, so he has Kerryon, he has Sony. Carlos Hyde is also on that list, but we're going to go ahead and eliminate Carlos. I actually like the matchup quite a bit for Duke Johnson today. I think this is a good bounce back spot for Duke, so I'm moving on from Carlos Hyde. Hate that matchup on the road against the Chargers front 7. And then it's between Frank Gore and Christian Kirk. Now, Kirk, to me, continues to see a ton of targets in Arizona's system because they're running so many plays on offense. They're continuing to stay on the field. That's always advantageous to wide receivers. And meanwhile, Frank Gore, the ageless wonder, gets an opportunity to put up some points against a terrible Cincinnati Bengals defense. So it's basically we got to choose two between Kerryon, Sony, Frank, and Christian Kirk in a half-point PPR situation. So now I think it makes it a little bit easier.
It does. I'm going to go with Kerryon and Sony then. As much as I want to trust Frank Gore, I do, and I think he's going to have a big game. I mean, first of all, where's T.J. Yeldon in all of this? Even going back to the last couple of weeks, where is this guy? When Fournette went down in Jacksonville, we saw him able to produce, whether it's rushing or getting dump offs. At some point, Ben, this guy's got to come through. However, with this great matchup that Frank Gore has and expected to see significant carries according to reports, it's all lining up for him today, but still going to go Kerryon.
I'm going to go with Sony and with Christian Kirk today, and part of the reason is it's not that I don't believe in Kerryon Johnson, but you're right. I think the way that you attack the Eagles is through the air. And coincidentally enough, I like how they've been using both Kirk and Fitzgerald in the slot. In Carolina, I don't remember his name, but they have one of the worst slot corners in the NFL. So I think that they're going to still get Kirk a bunch of volume in the PPR setting. I just give that a slight edge. So yeah, Michelle's not going to catch passes, but I do think he gets into the end zone a couple times. So you're going with Carrion and Sony Michel. I am going with Sony Michel and Christian Kirk. Good luck to you, Corey. From PVJ McLean on YouTube, John Ross, Cincinnati's on the road at Buffalo, or Nelson Aguilar for my flex and non-PPR. We have to talk about John Ross for a second. By the way, it is the top of the hour here on Fantasy Football Sunday, presented by Fantasy Sports Markets. He, of course, is Justin Fensterman. I'm Ben Heisler. I don't know why we're doing like this top of the hour. Like, I just realized like I'm not in radio anymore. Like, I don't need like a station ID.
I'm like, is there an update coming or something like that? All right, Ben, let's talk about some of the injuries we're facing today. LaShawn McCoy shall play.
I just realized, like, it's just you've been running radio for so long that like you're just so used to like these top of the hour, bottom of the hour resets. No, we're doing a live show. Like, what are we doing?
And next you're gonna throw to a commercial break, and I'm gonna be all messed up.
You're gonna be like, what? Yeah. Hello. A few more minutes with John Ross. But yeah, John Ross and Nelson Aguilar in a non-PPR toss-up. I think the play here is probably. Well, the thing is that Ross has gotten in the end zone the last 2 weeks too. I just don't see it happening against Buffalo. Buffalo has got the best rated secondary in the NFL. So I think you have to go Aguilar, even though he's not getting rewarded for all the volume that he's going to get. Is that the way to go, even though Ross has gotten in the end zone more?
I'm just expecting one of the most targeted receivers of Week 3 to be Nelson Aguilar, and familiar in this offense. While you're looking at John Ross, I mean, deep play you're going to have to rely on there. I mean, at some point, this guy has been a top 5 receiver in fantasy. At some point, teams are going to have to start covering this guy. There's no A.J. Green, so it's him and Boyd. That's pretty much it. I'm going to go with Aguilar because I'm chasing the targets. That's the real answer.
I think that's the way that you have to go, even in a non-PPR setting. Just volume leads to opportunity, leads to red zone touches, leads to touchdowns. Ross can burn anybody, and if he gets into the end zone, it's just a good job by Andy Dalton. I just think even in a non-PPR setting, you probably have to go with Aguilar this week. From Droppin' X Science Xbox on YouTube Live, half-point PPR flex. Who do you go with between Carlos Hyde, John Ross, Mike Williams, and LaShawn McCoy? So again, I'm not a fan of Carlos Hyde today. I think you can go ahead and eliminate him from the conversation. Then it's back to John Ross in a really tough matchup. So we'll probably eliminate him too. So it's Mike Williams going up against Houston or LaShawn McCoy if he starts Fensty against Baltimore. And a half-point PPR up against Houston, I think Mike Williams is the play here.
It is because, again, even with LaShawn McCoy, they're going to, again, the Chiefs with Andy Reid, they're going to use running back by committee no matter who's on the field and who's not. So with LaShawn McCoy having health issues, and again, with the weather being what it is, he could be on some kind of load management, once again, chasing the expected targets. Mike Williams was questionable going into last week, Ben, and then the report came out was that he was only going to be used in red zone situations, which translates to me, as someone who's covered sports for a while like you have, Ben, that they need this guy out there right now. They know Keenan Allen, who's in a good spot, is going to get all that coverage. So with that, again, chasing the targets, going Mike Williams there.
Absolutely. I saw Corey is checking on YouTube Live. He had that Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson toss-up, which we answered a while back. I'm going with Deshaun Watson just because I think he's one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in fantasy. Yes, it is a tough matchup against the Chargers, but he can always make things happen with his legs. I prefer Watson today. And I'm trying to remember. Did you say you preferred?
I said Wilson. I said I just prefer Wilson today.
Okay, so we slightly disagree on that, Corey. So either one of those options you can feel secure about. And he also thinks that you need a Toronto Raptors jersey. Maybe there's a week for that next week.
I have a Vince Carter one. I will break that out at some point.
All right, very good. Our buddy Seth, always good to hear from Seth, and he was trying to find us on Periscope, and I think Periscope's having some issues today. Half-point PPR, Kerryon Johnson, or he says Monty, so I'm assuming that's David Montgomery. Right? Like, how many other Monties?
We need real names. Come on.
I mean, you can go with nicknames, but like I'm a Bears fan, and I haven't heard David Montgomery be referred to as Monty yet.
Let me ask you this, Ben. If I came to you with a question, I said, yeah, I've got Bobby Trees, and we were on a live show and you had 2 seconds to think about who that is, would you know who that is immediately? Bobby
Bobby
Trees.
Trees? No.
Robert Woods. That's the kind of nicknames we've been getting on shows.
Yeah, just when in doubt, go with the full name. And Seth he's a loyal watcher of our show. I'm a big
Yes.
fan of Seth. So
I was almost named Seth, so I love Seth.
So if it's half point PPR between Carrion and David Montgomery, I'm probably leaning Montgomery because Washington is the second worst team in the NFL at stopping the run. They're giving up over 168 yards per game. So I'm sliding towards Montgomery. And I was really encouraged, by the way, Fensty, last week to see him get the bulk of the carries for Chicago. And I think they're going to continue to use him.
And that will continue, Ben, and that's why I'm going to go with David Montgomery as well, play the matchup here. Ben, I've been getting a few questions. I'll say this because I like to add in a little bit of this.
Yeah.
I've been getting a few questions about rostering Tariq Cohen in season long. I don't know what to think about this guy. There have been bad vibes since going back to last season with Tariq Cohen. I don't want to roster him, but do you think that he will have a legit role moving forward with all the receivers and with David Montgomery, who's obviously going to get the bulk of the workload?
I think he will. The problem is that it's just not going to be in the way that we're accustomed to seeing. The problem is that Jordan Howard couldn't do anything consistently last year, right?
Right.
Like he was a 3-yard guy, just getting a bunch of volume, and they were using Cohen a lot more in the running back spot because there was just a spot that he could make plays, and they didn't have as many concerns at the wide receiver spot as they do now. I don't mind playing Tariq Cohen in the flex or having multiple wide receiver sets with Anthony Miller and Tariq Cohen both playing out of the flex. Do whatever you can to make Mitch Trubisky's life easier. So I think they know that with Tariq Cohen, when he gets the ball in space, he can make something happen. But I also expect him, like I didn't buy on him this year because I just thought the Bears were going to spread it around too much. I thought Allen Robinson would still be the wide receiver one. But after that in Montgomery, I just didn't have a whole lot of conviction there. So if Tariq Cohen has a big game, I feel like that would be a great opportunity to sell high on him. But I guess you could play him this week based on what your running back situation is because of how bad Washington is at stopping running backs. The problem is that I just don't know whether they're going to use him more in that running back role. He played a lot more routes out of the slot this week.
That game right now, 41. Very low total. So, Ben, thinking that there's such a low total, I think ownership on a lot of these guys are going to be low. Ben, you're on the Bears, man. You're getting me in on the Bears a little bit more, Ben.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's keep going with questions from the YouTube channel. We also see some questions coming. I see one from Chris on Twitter as well. This one coming in from CJ. Oh, I'm sorry. Seth had one more question that we'll follow up on. And then he has a wide receiver toss-up between John Brown, Josh Allen as his quarterback. They are at home against Cincinnati. DJ Moore on the road at Arizona, or Christian Kirk at home against Carolina. That one is, I think, a little bit more of a tougher matchup here. Only because these are all really good spots for all of these guys. I think the safest play out of all of them is still probably DJ Moore, just because of the targets that he's been getting. Granted, that was from Cam Newton, so now you're making a quarterback change. I think the play is probably John Brown here.
Yes, see, that's what I was going to say. I think you go with the safest option being John Brown and Josh Allen in a good matchup here. He's connecting with them early on. So, again, until teams really start putting the screws to John Brown, you still continue to go with him. With me, I'm going John Brown there.
Okay, we'll go John Brown there as well. So, Seth, good luck to you. Thanks, as always, for checking in. And thanks for finding us on YouTube Live today. From CJ, we got to pick two of these three guys. Standard League, Robert Woods, Bob Trees, as you like to call him. Sammy.
No, I don't like to call him.
Sammy Watkins. Or he just says Gordon. I'm assuming he means Josh Gordon here. Pick two for Standard. That's really tough because I like all three of these guys quite a bit today. Do you fade Watkins with this weather? Because I don't feel like I want to, Fensty. He got 14 targets last week in week 2, and he wasn't the big name guy, but he has the ability, especially with his speed, to break the slate going up against Baltimore. Toughest matchup for sure. Like Woods without having to deal with any of the really good Cleveland corners, and Josh Gordon going up against the Jets. They have the best matchups out of anybody. If you think that Marlon Humphrey is going to be shadowing Watkins, then yeah, you might have to bench him.
Right, and definitely clinch Josh Gordon right now. because not only because of the Antonio Brown situation, but James White being out, those Patriots receivers are going to get a few more targets now. So I'm going to be starting both Edelman and Gordon in a lot of DFS this week, Ben.
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly reasonable play. And again, it's against a divisional opponent, too. So I thought the Patriots might go a little bit soft against the Dolphins, considering that Brian Flores and everybody else from that staff used to be with New England. And they tried. I think they really tried, Fency, to let him hang around for a little bit. And then Ryan Fitzpatrick kept throwing the ball to the wrong guys in the wrong jerseys, and it just got progressively worse.
Ben, I had the Patriots defense last week, and I was actually sweating that out because at the tail end of the game, the Dolphins are driving, and I want those shutout points and nearly missed out on them. That's what it's come to with Miami. You're hoping that they get shut out, and that's what they've been getting. So they're a minor.
Which defense do you prefer this week, Fensty, between the Patriots defense and the Cowboys defense in daily fantasy? Because those are going to be the two by far most popular DFS choices this week.
In tournaments, I'm going to try to pick a different defense.
Oh, no, I agree. I'm talking about like just if you had to choose between those two.
Going Cowboys defense.
Cowboys defense. Okay. Very good.
Cowboys defense.
Let's go with a question on YouTube Live from Jamil. PPR flex between Frank Gore, Stephon Diggs, and Nelson Aguilar. If it's PPR, I think Aguilar still probably is the play. Gore does not catch many passes out of the backfield. Stephon Diggs is going to have a blow-up game. I just don't know when it's coming, and so I think certainly he's the higher upside of those three guys. But Aguilar, just he's going to get peppered with targets this week, so I think he's probably the guy that I'm going with.
Right.
That was easy.
I'm actually going to be going with. I'm still going with Diggs here. I'm thinking when it comes to being in the air, I'm thinking that the Vikings are going to put up a lot of points today. So I'm actually going to go Diggs. But again, Aguilar to me, even if Jeffrey plays, still in a safe spot.
Stephon Diggs has caught three passes the first 2 weeks of the season. I mean, it's just at some point he's too talented to not start to rack up some more volume. He got 7 targets. He's gotten 3 catches, 9 targets on the season, caught a touchdown to basically save his day last week. So, at some point,
the yards per catch has been good.
Very good,
Ben. It's almost 29 yards per catch as well. So again, this is the type of play where maybe not a lot of people are.
Yeah. For sure. From Aiden on YouTube Live. So should I start Tyrell Williams or Darren Waller against Minnesota? If you have to start one of them, and it's a really tough matchup, I think you go Waller because that's if you're going to try and exploit Minnesota, it might be in the middle of the field. Tyrell, normally, I loved him last week too, Fence. I really liked both those guys last week against the Chiefs. Tyrell ended up getting a touchdown. Waller caught another several passes. I think Waller, probably the higher floor guy, probably the safest play between those two.
Right, and even though he ended up getting taken off the injury report, Tyrell Williams was a bit banged up this weekend as well, so may not be playing at 100%.
Absolutely. A few more coming in on YouTube Live. Let's get to this is from a no name. I'm anonymous. I have a tough question. Flex Calvin Ridley or LaShawn McCoy in a half-point PPR. Did we already get to this one? Was this one on Twitter from earlier before Fensty? And we went with Calvin Ridley, right? Yeah. And by the way, I don't know whether I cut out a little bit or maybe you did. PD Dubs, what's your guys' temperature on Mike Evans this week or the rest of the season in season-long leagues? Let me tell you, this is a week, I think, if Mike Evans can break out, this is the week to do it against the Giants. They haven't stopped anybody through the air this season. Mm-hmm. Winston should be looking his way. I think they're going to take more shots down the field, too. I think that there's a bit of a squeaky wheel game for O.J. Howard. It's part of the reason that I'm a little bit concerned about Chris Godwin, too, who's been so good all year. You can't bench him. But I just feel like they're going to look more in the direction of Mike Evans, more in the direction of O.J. Howard. I feel like if Winston is able to start spreading it around a little bit more, he'll start to feel more comfortable, and then he'll be able to get better matchups and not worry about turning the ball over as much.
Yeah, from looking at it from a season outlook here, the one thing that you have to remember if you own Godwin or even Mike Evans is Jameis Winston's one of the most volatile quarterbacks in the NFL. So you know that you're getting that kind of investment. You're handcuffed to Jameis in that regard. So yes, you will have games where he's throwing diamonds out there, a ton of targets, everything's working out. But it's really going to be either everything's working out or he's throwing a zillion turnovers. We've been on this roller coaster ride last season, and it's going to continue to happen until he shows true growth.
Yeah. From Chris at CRAD214 on the tweet machine. Who do you start between Devontae Freeman or Allen Robinson today? Freeman is on the road against the Colts. Allen Robinson in the Monday night game on the road at Washington. This is a situation, too, Fensty, where both of these guys could just have killer games. Killer games. Freeman going up against the Colts have not been good against the run so far this year, but we were talking about Matt Ryan and Julio Jones in great situations as well. So maybe you worry that if they get off to a big game, maybe there's just not much more love for Devontae Freeman the rest of the way. Coincidentally, Allen Robinson in really good matchups this week against Washington. So where do you go here?
When it comes to two players, this is where I go with the position here. This is where I go with the safety, and that is the running back spot. I know Devonta Freeman has been one of the most disappointing players in fantasy this year thus far. But again, we're 2 weeks into the season. This is now week 3. At some point, you drafted this guy in the 3rd round for a reason, season long. I'm thinking Devonta Freeman has a bigger week this week, so I'm going him.
All right, I'll go with Freeman as well. It's just they're intriguing matchups, and especially for somebody like Allen Robinson. It's so based on Mitch Trubisky constantly locking him in, and at some point he needs to start spreading it around a little bit more. Obviously, if you're an Allen Robinson owner, you're saying no, don't do that at all. But that's going to help Mitch Trubisky grow as a quarterback, right? Like him locking in on what he's still making this. All right, I need to get on a Mitch Trubisky rant for a quick second, because people are reminding me, Fensty, every week of who went after Trubisky. That would be Pat Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. He was a project. Understandably so. First 7 games of his NFL career, he played under John Fox in a dog shit offense. Then he gets Matt Nagy, and he takes a nice step forward. Still has some bad games, still making some mistakes, but okay, year 1. Year 2, man, he said this was supposed to go from quarterback 101 to quarterback 202. Now, he is failing the class in the first 2 weeks of the season. And granted, the matchups have been a bit tough. Green Bay looks good. Denver, at home, tough place to play. But he looks lost, Fensty. He's locking in on one guy. He's so indecisive. He's afraid to to go ahead and have some conviction. So maybe that pass against Denver to Robinson to set up the 53-yard field goal is a turning point for him. I really hope so. He's not going to be Mahomes. He's not going to be Watson. But you have to be competent as the number 2 pick in the draft. And right now, he just doesn't look competent. Hopefully that comes against Washington this week.
Right. And I'm actually going to expect him to run a little bit more against Washington.
I hope
this
so.
This is where I bring this is where I bring NFL reality back into it. And again, if the Redskins defense is that vulnerable, then why isn't this total higher than 41? That's my question. It's because there's zero confidence in Mitch right now. Now, translating back to this guy's question that we're answering here, Devonta Freeman just seems like in a much safer position than Allen Robinson. And I love Allen Robinson, too, for the season-long outlook, but waiting to see if Mitch can take advantage against a piss-poor Redskins team that he should be able to beat. I'll sit there and speculate and watch Ben, and I'll go Devonta Freeman, who I know has the ability to put up 18 to 20 points in a half-point PPR.
All right, here's one coming in from at MTBridges83 on Twitter. He says, I have Chris Carson and Philip Lindsay as my running backs 1 and 2 with Randall Cobb in the flex. I have Le'Veon Bell and Darwin Thompson on the bench, along with Jamison Crowder and Shady McCoy. Figures I would pass on the Jets since they're playing New England today. But what direction should I go in the flex? So it's basically deciding, he says Carson is starting, and then Philip Lindsay is in against Green Bay with Randall Cobb in the flex. Let's start with Le'Veon Bell. You can't bench Le'Veon Bell even against New England, right? Like you got to substitute Le'Veon in for Philip Lindsay, right?
You do, and that's the thing. And again, I see where he's going with Randall Cobb, and especially looking at Randall Cobb and the injuries that Dallas is facing today,
Correct.
and we haven't really talked about this matchup here when seeing Zeke expected to get normal carries, but Tavon Austin and Michael Gallup both out of there, meaning a lot more targets are coming. I know everyone's darling is Devin Smith. Randall Cobb is a vet, and he's still there coming out of the slot. He's going to get more targets as well, so I get where he's coming from. But you can't bench Le'Veon Bell. What are you doing? Why?
I agree. And what is Philip Lindsay? What has Philip Lindsay done yet to show you that he's absolutely worth of a start right now? It's a full time committee with him and Royce Freeman.
Right. You know, with Le'Veon Bell, you're at least getting that full workload. So now the question is, Ben, I almost said Royce Freeman, Philip Lindsay or Randall Cobb, where at this point, Randall Cobb's going to be targeted a lot in this game.
Yeah, I have no problem with Randall Cobb in the flex in this particular matchup. I think Denver's going to have to throw to beat Green Bay today, and we haven't seen Lindsay get involved in the passing game as much as we initially thought. So I will say this, though. I was thinking about this because we brought up, Aaron Rodgers as a starting quarterback option, and they are playing in the rain. Vic Fangio has done a terrific job when he was with Chicago at slowing down Aaron Rodgers as the defensive coordinator. So that's just something to consider as well. I know that Rodgers is at home. I know that the rain is potentially a factor there, but is that something that you consider into the matchup as well? Possibly Aaron Rodgers being slowed down a little bit? Maybe it becomes more of an Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams game?
You know what? There are a few teams that are good at slowing down the pace. We talked about Buffalo before. They're good. They're really good at slowing down the pace. But and if you look at their defensive stats, they're up there for a reason here. So when looking at the situation, again, I can't trust Philip Lindsay at the end of the day. Not yet. And Royce Freeman, too. I'm in very much wait-and-see mode with this Denver run game.
Yeah, that's perfectly fair. And then with Jamison Crowder, I understand sitting him with Luke Falk at the quarterback spot. Still not sure whether or not LaShawn McCoy is going to go. He also has both McCoy and Darwin Thompson. So I think the play here for you, Matt, is Chris Carson with Le'Veon Bell as your running back 1, running back 2. And then that flex, Randall Cobb's going to get the volume and the opportunity in a great matchup today. I think that's the direction that you go in.
Right. That's where I am. We're on the same page.
Beautiful. I love it when we're on the same page. Isn't it nice?
Yeah. Well, no, but we're not always going to be on the same page. It's great when we are, Ben, but at the same time,
100%.
This is why we do this, because sometimes, you and I face off a lot in fantasy, and our philosophies, while similar, very different. I try to always think like a coach as well, even in fantasy. And Ben, that's the thing. That just shows the realism. We're not trying to both be right on every question. You're going to have to decide out there, because part of this, Ben, we're teaching all of you how to think like a coach as well for your fantasy teams.
From our buddy Mark the Overseer on Twitter, start 2 in PPR between Julian Edelman, Larry Fitzgerald, and Hollywood Brown. Edelman for sure is a lock. Go ahead. I think the tougher question is whether or not you go with Fitz at home against Carolina or Hollywood Brown. Normally, I think you would go with Brown in that matchup against the Chiefs, but Fensty, is the rain going to be a factor here, and you just go with Fitzgerald?
I'm going to go with Fitz as well. 200-plus yard games. Again, so besides the fact that there are weather issues, Fitz really locked in and getting a chance to watch Arizona a lot thus far. Fitz is getting open all over the field. And again, 200-plus yard games to start the season. I'm going Fitz there.
From Mr_Proctober on the tweet machine. Talked about Hollywood Brown. He's back in the conversation. Do you prefer him or DJ Moore this week?
Ooh, Ben, see, I should be asking you this question here because you're a little bit more on Carolina than I am.
I am. I probably go DJ Moore just because I like the targets, and I don't think Kyle Allen's going to go away from it. Moore is operating out of the slot. I don't think they're going to take a ton of deep chances, maybe with the exception of Curtis Samuel. Normally young quarterbacks, you want to try and get the ball out quick, right? Norv Turner offense,
right.
3-step drop, boom, deliver the football, whether it's to McCaffrey out of the flat, DJ Moore across the middle of the field, Curtis Samuel deep. So I'd probably go DJ Moore here, only if you're starting to worry about the rain and whether or not that's going to impact Lamar Jackson's accuracy.
Right, even though he's with the different quarterback, DJ Moore, again, looking like he's the safer option here, both in stellar matchups, obviously.
When it comes to the Patriots, we were talking about James White being out and it possibly a good opportunity for Sony Michel to really run wild today. Where are you on Rex Burkhead as far as sort of assuming the James White role in this matchup against the Jets? Are you buying on him? Do you think he's a notable fantasy option, especially on the DFS side this week as a dart throw?
especially with what we're expecting to happen in this game with the huge point spread. I think Rexburg had absolutely in play today.
Okay. Any other last-minute injury news coming in? We'll have most of that coming up at the bottom of the hour. And make sure you guys are following Justin on Twitter at Fensty Sports. Follow me on Twitter at Benny Heisen at FSM Contest. As you guys are making your lineups, we will continue to monitor all the different injury news coming in to make sure that it's going to be everything up to date, so that you are fine to be able to get ready for the start of Week 3 in the NFL. Before we get to some of our favorite cash game plays over at FantasySportsMarkets.com, and again, there is a free promo code below. Enter any of our contests for the $5 contest for free on us, and turn $5 into a possible $50,000, maybe $25,000, depending on what you play if you hit that roster bonus. So we've gone over a lot of matchups today, Fancy. We've gone through a lot of different discussions and a lot of intriguing games and matchups. We've also seen a lot of totals go down. What about on the other side? Is there a game that you're intrigued and possibly want to stack, but you don't feel like a lot of people are going to be on this week? I'm looking at maybe Houston and the Chargers, seeing that total go up from 48 up to 49. We've seen the Falcons and the Colts. That number sort of stayed right where it's been at 47. There's no weather to worry about. But mostly a lot of these games, the totals have gone down quite a bit. Buffalo and the Bengals have seen their number go up from 42 to 43.5. So any of these games really intrigue you as far as game stack for today?
I mean, the Giants-Bucks do, Ben, and that's because one thing we haven't really discussed, Daniel Jones now starting too, and some of our analysts on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio think he has top 5 quarterback potential for Week 3. And looking at this matchup with the total being 48, it stayed as it has since all morning long. Again, Ben, you've been talking about it in season long for the receivers for the Bucks getting targeted a ton here. What about the Giants side, though? I'm expecting Sterling Shepard, who's back, is out of the concussion protocol. I'm expecting Sterling Shepard and Evan Engram to also have pretty big days against this Tampa team.
I think that's a really good point that you brought up. And I said this when they announced that Daniel Jones is going to be the starter. If you'd watch him in the preseason, he looked really good. Again, it's preseason play, so you have to take everything with a grain of salt. But what impressed me is that he was accurate, he got the ball out quick. He matches this type of offense that the Giants want to run. Pat Shurmur offense, when he was having success in Minnesota with Case Keenum, was get the ball out quick, be decisive in your reads, and have a bunch of really good possession wide receivers to make big plays. Sterling Shepard can do that. Golden Tate, when he's healthy, can do that. Evan Engram is a terrific young tight end. Do they have a guy that's really much of a deep threat at this point? No, but they don't really need it. And again, you're going to move your safeties back because Saquon Barkley is so good, and Jones is going to deliver him the ball as well. So I do like Daniel Jones quite a bit, and we'll see whether or not this is the ideal matchup for him. The total is interesting, but yeah, certainly worth a dart throw in GPPs this week.
Right. Now, at the beginning of this, if thinking that Eli was going to be starting still before the benching, I thought that eventually I'd be able to start stacking defenses against the Giants. But now with Daniel Jones in there, I'm going to have to turn a bit and change that game plan because I'm looking for a team, especially in season long as well, where I can start streaming against because, again, I don't put much stock into defense. I play the matchups, Ben.
All right, let's go through some of our favorite cash and GPP plays over at Fantasy Sports Markets. Again, there's no salary caps. You can draft who you want. Before we get to that, one last quick question from Anthony. He sneaks it into the very last minute. One for flex between Kerryon Johnson, Nelson Aguilar, or DK Metcalf. I think for this one, purely based on PPR, I'm probably going Nelson Aguilar.
I'll go there too.
Okay.
We're on the same page.
So at the quarterback spot, obviously Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott are the top options for cash. I'm not too worried about the weather in Kansas City affecting both of those guys. Anybody else for cash that I'm not considering?
And when it comes to, I'm trying to think when it comes
to... Would you put Tom Brady in the conversation? Deshaun Watson, Matt Ryan?
I would. There's not really many quarterbacks I'm off of. I'd say in our contest that we're doing, Matt Stafford is my starting quarterback in the Beat Benny Heist contest.
Love it. I love the conviction you're going to get him at super low ownership as well. I think GPP plays Matt Ryan certainly in the conversation. If you want to trust Jameis Winston, this is the matchup to do it. Josh Allen against Cincinnati. More of a cash game play on the salary sites, but a great tournament play on Fantasy Sports Markets. And don't forget about Phillip Rivers. If you're buying in Keenan Allen, if you're buying on Austin Eckler today, Phillip Rivers is a great tournament quarterback when it comes to fantasy sports markets when you're playing daily. Running back spot, there's still plenty of really intriguing options in cash. Certainly McCaffrey is in play. Zeke Elliott at home against Miami. Saquon is always going to be a cash game play. And then Dalvin Cook at home for Minnesota. He's such a focal point of that offense.
Right. Those I'm looking at, Dalvin Cook, Austin Eckler, Ben, who you mentioned, in a good spot as well. Also, again, we talked about it with no Rashad Penny. It's looking like Chris Carson. How do you not love him? Again, fumbling issues, schmumbling issues. They're giving this guy the rock.
Yeah, Carson was a really fun tournament play for me, and I still think he's a tournament play on fantasy sports markets, probably more so cash now on the salary sites. And then if you're looking for another intriguing option this week, you mentioned Kerryon Johnson as an intriguing play. Devontae Freeman, certainly another intriguing tournament option at the running back spot as well. Wide receiver, Keenan Allen, probably going to be one of the more popular cash game plays. Same thing with Julio Jones. Tough matchup for DeAndre Hopkins on the road against Casey Hayward and the Chargers. And then Devontae Adams likely going to be shadowed by Chris Harris. Anybody else as far as cash game wide receivers? Mentioned Julian Edelman as well as a guy that you might like this week.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And also, guys that we've brought up throughout the show, and you guys have been asking a lot of questions. Nelson Aguilar is definitely in there in FSM contest for me. Kenny Galladay as well, again, on the Lions. So I am looking to handcuff Stafford to Galladay on salary and non-salary DFS sites.
Last but not least, Travis Kelce, I think, is the best pass catcher for Kansas City that you can feel comfortable pairing him up with Mahomes with the rain. George Kittle, certainly in play against Pittsburgh. They have had a struggle on defense this year, although I do anticipate that Pittsburgh is going to get themselves figured out, and I think they'll actually do a pretty good job against San Francisco today. Not a lot of people see that happening. I think the line is still about 7.5. I think Pittsburgh can cover today. But Kittle is in line for a big game. And Zach Ertz, if we're talking about Aguilar getting a ton of targets, could see upwards of 13 or 14 targets today.
Definitely. Now, let me ask you this, Ben. This is someone that I'm thinking about putting in the Beat Benny Heights contest here. You mentioned George Kittle. What about the other side of it? Vance McDonald. Once we saw him with Mason Rudolph, all of a sudden the touchdown came rolling in.
They did.
Vance McDonald in a good spot today.
I like the Vance McDonald call quite a bit. I don't know if I would prefer him to say. I mean, I would prefer Kelce or Kittle or Ertz or Ingram, but certainly low ownership on the side of Vance McDonald this week. And there you have it. That is Week 3 edition of Fantasy Football Sunday, presented by Fantasy Sports Markets. Follow Fensty on Twitter. Read his work over at Fantasy Alarm. Listen to him on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. He will be back on the air next Saturday morning from, is it 6 to 8 Eastern or 7 to 9 Eastern?
6 to 8 a.m. Eastern, or anytime you want with On Demand. SiriusXM On Demand. You can get your beauty rest. As you can tell, I don't need it. I don't sleep.
There you go. And there's a good possibility that I might hop on with you next weekend as well, talk a little bit of FSM and break down the Week 4 slate. So
if you don't decline my interview request. Ben.
Oh, stop. Although you're right, I did. I was coming back from a wedding and a crying baby. Next week will be a little bit different. Big thanks to my guy Fensty. Thanks to all of you guys for participating and watching with us. I will be with you the next hour and a half trying to answer some of your lineup questions, getting you ready for Fantasy Sports Markets. Jump in on that overlay, people. Have a blast in Week 4 or Week 3. Week 4 will be next week. He's Fensty. I'm Ben. Thank you guys for watching Fantasy Football Sunday.